Your thoughts on those two guys as depth pieces in the edge room? And look, if either one is a starter, then I don't know how much money you can pay Sterling Lucas, but it's not enough because if either one of these guys comes out there and balls, and then you have a 1-year development with Kyle Kennard last year where he went from spotty player to NFL draft pick and Narguski Award winner in 1 year. I think it speaks volumes. But all that aside, Alex, your thoughts about those two pickups.
Yeah, obviously in that room you needed numbers with losing Wendell Gregory, and then with I'm not sure we know the extent of Jaylen Brown's injury right now, but obviously he didn't return for spring practice. So you needed numbers in that room, and you went out and got him. And I think with Wilson, he's kind of intriguing just because of he was a really as you mentioned, a highly ranked recruit coming out of high school. Then goes to Campbell after Florida State. He's been productive there, had 7 sacks in 2 years there, I think. And so there's some production there that I think Sterling Lucas and those guys can build on. And I'd be interested to see if he can give you, if either of those guys can really give you really anything this year when they come in. Because I think right now, if you think about that edge room, you maybe would pencil in Brian Thomas Jr. as the starter opposite of Dylan Stewart. But, guys like Deju, I thought he had some moments in that spring game as well. And then you also got, JT Gear is in there right now. And I just think, you continue watching that room and you look at it, they just need the numbers. And I'm really intrigued with Wilson, especially because I think he, as I mentioned, there's some production there. And I think what we've seen with Sterling Lucas and how he can develop those guys, let's see what he can do with George Wilson and Clowney. I think, just anything with those guys, really both of those guys you can get from those guys you take.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Both these guys have played too. They played college football. They're older, 5th-year guys. Because what you don't want to do is, because if you have an injury, and you start at edge making freshmen go in and play significant minutes, other coaches will identify that on you, and then they'll check into an ISO run play on the outside. And they'll double team that guy and pancake him, and he'll lose confidence forever. I can't come back. You mentioned Desmond Umeozulu. Give me your take on him. I thought that. As someone that did not watch every play of the spring game, I watched enough of it. I had a spy sending me video. But the feedback, I thought that was one of the more encouraging things to hear, because Dez has played quite a bit. I mean, 112 snaps last year, and has played in 24 of 25 games since he's been here. Just hadn't heard much out of it. I mean, just kind of been out there. When he's played. Your thoughts on what was the difference in the Dez you saw in the spring game versus the Dez you've seen in the 25 previous games he's played in?
I think he just continues to get bigger and stronger. And that was the thing when he came in from high school. I think you thought maybe it was going to take him a year or two just because he was a little lean, but he's put on a lot of muscle. And that was something that you realized last year when you're watching him. You could see that he has. And now I think the next step was just that on-field production. And Sterling Lucas has done a pretty good job of continuing to develop him. And I think it's just continuing to develop pass rushing moves and then being better in the run game. And I thought maybe he was a little bit quicker, I thought, coming off the ball. That's something I thought, just watching him, that was one of the first things that stand out. But, I think it's a big year for Deju just because I think it's now his time to put it all together. Like, as I mentioned, it was this first year, maybe 2, were just him kind of continuing to build and get bigger and stronger and faster. But now he's got an opportunity. I said to pencil in Brian Thomas Jr. as that started, but, don't count out Deju either. Like and they rotate so much of those positions too, especially, having to give guys like Dylan Stewart and the starter, whoever the other starter is going to be, a break. So I'm really interested to see Deju and think he could be in for a step up season.
Yeah, that would be a good time. If you, Alex, obviously it's April, but who do you pencil in as the starter opposite Dylan Stewart coming out of spring?
I think I would go Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, I think because I think when you look at his performance last year, he really kind of had a sneaky good season. Like, I think it was somewhere around maybe like 4 tackles for loss or so. And every time he gets in the game, it seems like he's involved in the play in some way. And I think, the knock has always been that maybe he's a little bit short for that defensive end spot, but he always goes 110% when he's out there on the field. And, like I said, it seems like he's always in on making plays and makes big plays at that. So I think it's kind of his time now. He's learned from guys like Kyle Kennard. He's seen, learned from Dylan Stewart as well, even though he's a younger guy, learned from Dylan as well, and has some other older guys to learn from. So it kind of feels like Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of his time this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I can think so. Maybe he's good. You could see he's got a high motor and actually did have some good production. I share some of the concerns JC does just from a size standpoint when you're going up against these linemen. But listen, you can overcome that with effort and technique.
One thing I think he can be really good is obvious pass rush standpoints. Like when it's a 3rd and long, I think they can throw him in there, and that's where he can really thrive as well.
Desmond Umeozulu is 6'6", 255 pounds.
I mean, you draw him up like that, right?
Right. I mean, that's why he's a heavily. I mean, in high school he played mostly inside. Brian Doan saw him play several times. He said, "Well, this kid's got a long way to go, but he's capable." I guess anytime you beat Ohio State on an out-of-state player, everybody's like expecting this guy to come in and take over, like, you know, Clowney style or Dylan Stewart style. But Desmond was never that type of recruit. He was a top 150 recruit because of his potential.
Yeah.
And if they can get that, I know Clint Morrison, our boy in the chat box, he's on the Big Spur as well. He says that's why I was so big on him. His frame is perfect for a DN. Yeah. And, you know, they're really outside of like universal recruiting hype, because Jaquavius Dodd was a 4-star by composite. They're really similar guys, like Desmond Umeozulu and Jaquavius Dodd. You know, Carolina obviously didn't beat Ohio State head-to-head on Dodd. He's an in-state guy. You know, there's not as much foot traffic as maybe there is in the state of Maryland, but they're the same kind of guy. You know, so there's that kind of upside. And I think that with Dodd in particular, although some people that have seen him, he's probably a little further along than maybe I think. But I think by year 3, if he's out there starting or whatever, that's fine. I also think there's some Devin Taylor syndrome going on where, you know, Devin Taylor was a guy they signed. You didn't hear about him at all. And then he was starting the next year. And you kind of thought that year in 2009, it was maybe about, as a redshirt freshman, maybe it was about, you know, depth or whatever. Cause I believe they moved Travian Robert. That's the year they moved Travian inside and he wasn't in because Travian had gotten hurt, something like that. I don't know. But, but you know, so, okay, well, it's Devin Taylor. First play of his career. He punches the ball out against like Russell Wilson at NC State, and Carolina won that game 7-3. So I always say Devin Taylor made quite an entrance, and so maybe people in their mind think if it's not by year 2, who knows? But I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I was surprised Desmond played 112 snaps with that group they had last year. I mean, that was crazy. So talking edge here, keeping it in that category. Here's what concerns me, and see if you agree about edge. I think South Carolina, I think even with Clowney and Wilson, I think those guys can rush the passer. I think that's what they are, is pass rushers. I think Brian Thomas Jr. can rush the passer. I believe Desmond can rush the passer. JT, all that other, and we know Dylan Stewart can. What worries me is this: Kyle Kennard last year. It sounds weird because of 11.5 sacks, but I thought he was elite against the run. I really did. I can't count how many times somebody tried to run wide. He'd bust their butt in the backfield. He set the edge. You know, I thought he was very effective in the run game, Alex, as well. Do you share that opinion?
I think there is maybe a little bit concerned with that, because a lot of it is a lot of teams are going to look at Dylan Stewart and be like, well, we're not running at that guy, so we're going to run the other way, and you've got to be good against the run. And I think if you're going to be just a straight pass rusher, a lot of those teams are going to feed off that. When you're running upfield, they're going to run right under you, let the tackle take you out and run right under you. Then it's going to come down to the linebackers being able to make a play. So that's something that I think they're going to continue to look at and see what they can do. But you're right, Kyle Kennard he was good all around, but good as a pass rusher, but he was also kind of sneaky good against the run. I think that's something that whenever the NFL draft talk comes around, like that's something that's going to have him up on the board as well. And I'm interested to see where he goes here in the next day or two. But But yeah, I think that's something that I am interested to hear about and I'm interested to see as preseason camp gets here.
JC and Mad Dog Mully on the Gamecock Show.